Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Luke.
And sorry about that. For some reason, there's a big white box over your face, Dave. I'll get rid of that. There you go.
I don't blame you. Nobody wants to look at me.
Yeah, today's stream is, well, as there often is, random little errors that go on. And today is definitely no different to normal. I started the stream without connecting the turntables to anything. And other little fuck ups, and plus, my DJing's never very good anyway.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've really enjoyed that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You probably just enjoyed it because the tunes were good rather than anything I did.
But you chose the tunes.
Yes, I'm a good tune pickerer. I definitely didn't just go, oh shit, which one next? I haven't planned this at all. That one will do. Definitely not.
It shows the natural talent.
So yes, hello and welcome everybody to the stream. And everybody who joined in for the mix today. We had a few more people actually listening to the mix, which is always nice. I'll take it as a compliment that you didn't turn off straight away. So thank you for that. And
that doesn't come until I start talking philosophy.
Or when we try and tell, say to other atheists that maybe we shouldn't be so mean to theists.
Yeah.
Or
at least we didn't cause chaos like Luke did with his mental illness thread.
Yeah, there's been two massive threads on Twitter recently, and I think let's get it off our chests because it's going to come up, right? So, Luke, tell us about this one that's caused you to need a Twitter break.
It was just too much. I don't understand this obsession with trying to belittle and degrade and insult theists to the point where you're actually stigmatizing a whole different group of people. So, obviously this was about mental illness. Somebody tweeted that, rhetorically, this wasn't a genuine question, I don't believe at all. But isn't faith in God some sort of psychosis?
It's crazy.
I said, oh, obviously not. and then apparently a bunch of people I said no initially, and then I retweeted saying people who don't know about mental health or mental illness shouldn't be telling people that they're mentally ill for believing in God. And then apparently that was controversial, which is crazy to me that that's controversial. I don't understand why. When like over 80% of the world's population believe in some sort of deity, that just says to me that it's not controversial.
Well, I mean, there's something that we should all remember is that part of our evolutionary survival traits is, or at least one of them is, assigning agency. Basically, there's a rustle in the bush, and it could be just the wind, but it could have also been a lion. And those that either went into fight and flight mode, assumed that there was some agent there going to attack them, were the ones that had a higher chance of survival than the ones that went, nah, probably nothing. So this is built into our DNA, the predisposition to believe in things, to assign agency. It's completely natural. Now, it's not saying that it's correct, because natural things aren't necessarily always good. You wouldn't want, a venomous snake to bite you, and that's completely natural too. But that doesn't make it a mental illness. We have a predisposition for assigning agency, and that's it.
And it's again one of these things where people think that there's a specific term used within a field, and then a colloquial use of that. So I'm thinking of the word delusion specifically here, where someone's delusional. They might think what's it called? That they're going to become a rock star or something because they play guitar. Yeah, and it's probably a delusion, right? That's a colloquial use. It's not any kind of mental illness, because it's just they're like an unrealistic expectation, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the psychological version of delusion, which is what people were talking about, which is something very specific in psychology, and everyone kept posting this like Googled definition of it from the DSM without posting the context, and also without understanding how that definition fits within an actual psychological or mental illness framework, which really annoys me. It really frustrates me because they see the words and they think that means anything. It's just, it's the same thing we spoke about before, and I think it was, is mental health real or mental illness real? So there's a whole stream about this whole subject, and it's about that language use. People look at these diagnoses and they go, "Oh my God, sometimes I feel a bit down. I must have depression." Or sometimes I feel a bit worried about things, so I must have anxiety, because the language in the DSM says those kind of things, like it's like an extreme worry about something. But then they don't understand what that extreme worry looks like, because they usually have never interacted with a psychotic person or an anxious person or a depressed person. And once you interact with those people, it's very clear what the difference is.
Yeah.
When you've worked on a mental health ward, it's very clear. It becomes very clear what a delusion is. And it's really hard to verbalize it on Twitter to help people to understand what that difference is. But it's one of those things you kind of get once you're in the field. You kind of see, oh, okay, yeah, that's a delusion. Like I was saying to one person, he said, how could you falsify that I was Jesus or not? And you can easily, because usually there's other aspects of it. Like they also believe aliens are coming to get them in a couple of weeks' time. Aliens don't arrive, for instance. There's easy ways of falsifying it, but I cannot do that on Twitter. And then people are like, gotcha.
Yeah, you also can't do it to people who are determined to show that you can't falsify it, because they'll teapot it.
Yeah, they'll be like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Also, people telling me I don't have freaking degrees because they don't like what I'm saying, because it goes against what they're saying.
You're not an expert. You're just a twerp with an agenda.
Send me a photo of your degree. No. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. I'm not going to put my degrees on Twitter.
Especially when he says that psychology isn't a real science anyway.
Oh my God, that guy was too much. That guy was too much.
And that's one thing to say. Skeptics and science enthusiasts, it doesn't look very good on you when you deny science.
Especially when all they've read about psychology are Freud and Jung. And those two, that's like reading anything by Charles Darwin and saying that's an accurate representation of modern day evolutionary theory. It's not.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good.
You know why though?
Catharsis.
It's Philip's fault.
It's Philip's fault.
And the other one that came up and reared its head again was the bloody rocks are atheists thing. Now
that is Sixtra's fault.
It is Chris's fault, right? Now Chris is a good friend of the channel, and he was trying to. I mean, he did fan the flames of this, but he basically said, even though he's got some wacky ideas about rocks being atheists, his views on science are amazing. He's talking about Aaron Ra. You've got to check out this podcast. Of course, Aaron Ra jumps in and starts defending this whole thing and using all the same arguments that have all been debunked, and more people are piling on with him. And you've even got lack-theists, as in the lack of belief atheists. I'm not using it in a derogatory way. I'm just trying to identify between the two.
Language, yeah.
You've even got the lack-theists there actually saying, no, this is ridiculous. Under any definition that you read, it always talks about a person who has this. And they've got plenty of justification. So, I mean, these are people who are on a different side of how they think atheism ought to be understood. Now, we're open. We don't care about how you actually define atheism. We just have a preferred use and we'll talk about it. But we accept that there are lack of belief atheists or lack-theists. So that's fine, right? If you want to be an atheist, but you define it that way, I don't care. As long as I understand that that's what you mean by it, we can have a conversation. But this whole rocks are atheist thing, I mean, he actually admitted within it a few different things. But he did even say his main reason for this argument is because he's arguing against people saying that babies can't be atheists. So he's showing that babies can be atheists because rocks can be atheists.
It's ideological, yeah.
Yeah. So he's not even approaching it with good reasoning. He's already got a goal in mind. I want to show that atheism is the default state, and therefore everything that is not a theist. And then that was the next thing. It was the false dichotomy, and he wouldn't accept that it was a false dichotomy. And then he tried to sort of tweak it a little bit and say, when I say atheist, I mean it as an adjective. And I was like, okay, well, I corrected him on that, saying, well, I think you mean atheistic then.
Atheist is a noun.
Yeah,
It's a noun.
But I think you mean atheistic rather than atheist then. And so the conversation went on there, and it was like, you look at the definitions of atheistic, it's still along the lines of atheist. So an atheistic religion is a religion where the people don't believe in a god or believe gods don't exist. That's what we'd mean by an atheistic religion. We're not saying that the religion itself is an atheist because it doesn't hold beliefs. I mean, every religion by that regard is an atheist, and the Bible is an atheist, and so on and so forth. It's bloody ridiculous defining it this way. Yet it came up again. Now, the reason I'm mentioning it is because Dave has actually put together a little video that we're trying to get out for Thursday, because we're not actually going to be streaming on Thursday. We're joining MathPig on his stream a little bit later. So we're trying, at least Dave is trying really hard to get this video finished and ready for our normal stream time then.
The script is done. I'm going to record the audio tomorrow and put it together, so it will be done.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Excellent.
Got to strike while the iron's hot. For it.
Oh, you're joining MathPig. That's cool.
Yeah.
Looks great.
I'm looking forward to it. Very looking forward to it.
I just add my 2 pence in about the Rocks of Atheist thing, though.
Of course you can.
I think my issue with it is different from a lot of other people's issues with it. And my issue with it is around that, like, even if we accept that it is an accurate description of a rock, it's inane to call it that. Like, it's just completely pointless. Like, the whole thing is pointless. It's like calling a rock hairless because it doesn't have hair. Or bald. I think I saw Dave using the term bald. Or calling it, like, legless because it doesn't have legs. Or anything like this, you know. There's a point where it's just like, if so many things are under that umbrella, there's literally no point in calling that thing. But like calling the smell of fried chicken chemically because it's a chemical reaction. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's inane. It's pointless.
Well, here's a sneak preview of part of the argument that I make. It's all well and good to say rocks are atheistic, and people say that they use that phrasing because it's true. It's not because it's ridiculous or anything like that. It's because it's true. Replace rocks are atheist with that church is atheistic.
Yeah.
What does that say?
Kind of sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
It does. Or the Bible is atheistic, or the Quran is atheistic.
Yeah.
Nobody will think, oh, well, the Bible and the Quran and churches lack a belief in God. They'll think it means that they promote atheism.
Exactly.
So if everyone wants to keep making that argument and be honest, replace rocks with the Bible.
Yeah.
And on your point, Luke, one of the things I actually said in my article when he first started off with this stuff, it was ontology and the things we lack, is that you don't just call someone bald because they don't have any hair on their head. There's a lot more that goes into it. Someone can shave their head, and you wouldn't refer to them as bald. You might be a skinhead, or they'd have a crew cut, or, you know, there's a name for the hairstyle where someone has chosen to shave their head off. Shave their hair off.
That'd be a great haircut.
Are we getting all French Revolution in here?
I think it'll make all three of us look much better.
Let's do it right
definitely
now.
would work with me.
But yeah, someone who is actually bald, it's generally because of a hormonal imbalance or aging, or, you know, those sorts of things. So there's a lot more tied to it, and you would, as you say, you'd only refer to someone who is bald who has the ability to grow hair, or at least is a species that has the ability to grow hair. and it's ridiculous to refer to things that can't grow hair as bald. Yes, they don't have hair. So what?
Oh, if we're using that as a thing, then all eagles are bald. Eagles. None of them have hair.
Oh, that's true. Actually, you're right. They're all got feathers, and feathers are not hair.
Yeah.
Well, on that front, could you technically regard a dog in that way? Because most dogs have fur and not hair. Some dogs do have hair, but most have fur. I mean, we're going into absurdums now, but
sort of. But the reason that we call the Chihuahua bald is because it doesn't have hair where other dogs normally do, not because it lacks hair.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think when it comes to fur and hair, they're sort of grouped together in that bald regard, aren't they? I was being a little bit silly, if it only applied to hair. But there are certain things that go into something being bald. You could say the same about someone being poor. It's not just a lack of money, because no children have money, or not many children have money. They live off their parents' money. It's a certain economic state, and actually it isn't even the quantity of money, because I don't know, say 100 quid in England isn't much money at all, but you could go to a different country where 100 quid could get you 10 weeks stay in a local B&B type place, so it's an economic state that runs out of a particular economy. You can be poor in one economy and rich in another. It's not just not having any money. So anyway, there are lots of reasons why this whole rocks are atheist things is ridiculous, and I've vented. We are cleansed. Thank you everybody for hearing to thank you everybody for listening to us rant about rocks not being atheists and theism not being a mental illness. Nice to see you here, Math Big. But yes, there's someone that Math Big's saying that he shaves to hide his baldness. So that's a sense of someone who is going bald and then going with the rest. So partially bald. Thank you for that. So Luke, anyway.
Yes.
We're here for particular reasons, aren't we?
We are here. We are. Yeah, we're here to discuss my beardless face in the picture at the start. I wasn't always a bearded heretic, as you've demonstrated. That was my punishment, apparently.
Yeah. For not being on the stream with us for like a month, man.
Hey, I'm a busy man.
He was out smashing rocks and creating atheists.
Yeah, the smaller the rocks, the more atheists there are. So
exactly. I mean, atheists are in the majority now, and always have been.
Oh, so yeah, we're here to talk about crime and punishment. I guess forensic psychology is what I had my master's degree in, and I think it's very on topic for you guys with your conversations around morality and moral philosophy. So I thought it was a really good idea to discuss the way in which crime is punished in the UK and other places, and see how that links in with some moral philosophies as well. So that's what we can discuss.
And as you know, we like it when it gets onto things like ethics, but it's also nice to have a different arena to discuss things in as well. So I think one of the first things you wanted to discuss is why there's so much crime, or what causes crime. Is that right?
Yeah. So
why is there so much, man?
And the reason I wanted to discuss it, I don't want to spend too long on this, but I think that having some understanding of why criminal behavior or offending behavior occurs puts into perspective how we should be going about our criminal justice system going forwards. Because if it's just somebody going out and committing a crime, and that is entirely their responsibility, there was no precursors or antecedents to that behaviour, then punishment probably, I guess, would be a viable option as a response to that. But if there are some things that actually cause that behavior that are out of that individual's control, then surely there's some element of responsibility for helping to shape that behavior. So that's my idea of why discussing the reasons for criminal behavior was.
So, I mean, we can think about a number of different things that could cause certain behaviors. Is there a particular behavior you'd like to focus on first, or a particular crime you'd like to focus on first that we can discuss?
I think I am going to talk about some general theories of criminal behavior, because you're right in saying that, because there are specific theories for specific types of offending. So, for instance, there's like specific theories around fire setting in adults. Yeah, but there are some overarching theories that lead to criminality and offending behavior that I think are worth talking about, more generally speaking, because if we get into nuances, it will get really complex and it might take too much time. So I guess there's a few things that can influence somebody's criminality. A few of them are surprising. I found them surprising when I learned about them. A few of them are probably seem like common sense. Socioeconomic status, I think, is probably one of the ones that seems like common sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of linked to something called strain theory. So strain theory is a sociological theory, not a psychological theory. So forensic psychology still is trying to get its own theories across, and its criminology, which is the sociology of crime, been around for a lot longer. So we borrow a lot of their theories and test them in the individual. So strain theory is about there are strains on somebody's life which prevent them from accessing things like, for instance, like status or romantic relationships, or like, you know, money, stuff like that. You know, that kind of thing through legal means, and that tends to happen in low socioeconomic status, low socioeconomic brackets, because people are have less opportunities to reach those goals, reach those opportunities, so they take it into their own hands under that strain. So, you know, if somebody wants to make loads of money, but the opportunities in the area are really low money thing, they might then turn to crime in order to do that. That's one of the big ones.
That makes a lot of sense, though.
Yeah. Another one is about self-control. So somebody's ability to control itself. That's usually linked to childhood development. So if somebody lacks the ability to control their behavior, they're impulsive, they're less likely to think about the long-term consequences of an action, therefore impulsively act in a moment.
So in that regard, I mean, you think about kids. Kids tend not to get their self-regulation coming in until they're about 4 years old. That's why you have things like the terrible twos, because they just want, and they don't, I want it, and they are pure desire machines, I guess, if you want to call them that.
Yeah, no, that's a really, exactly that. And it's those kind of period of time where if they're then kind of taught self-control, taught to wait for that gratification, then at that point, what that means is that they can then use that later on in life. Like, the young years are really important in developing pro-social attitudes. I think people like underestimate, actually, a lot of the time how, like, Freud didn't, but loads of people underestimate how our young lives influence the rest of our lives in terms of like how we act and stuff. Self-control is a big one of those. That's actually linked in. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I mean, would we say that there's other conditions that neuroses, etc., that could also create a sort of impulse control issue?
Absolutely. I think, So, you know, when people start to develop like any kind of mental illness that causes, basically, there's this thing called executive functioning, which is your ability to reason, rationalize, predict outcomes, that kind of thing. So it's essentially it's a very human trait about like long-term predictions and stuff like that. And if that's impaired in any way, so that could be through mental illness, that could be through a low IQ or a low like cognitive ability, or it could be through neglect or childhood trauma, then that's going to influence your ability to make informed decisions, and also to be able to make to self-regulate your behavior, which is the cause of, like, and then what happens is that, somebody sees like a door that's open or something like that, and they'll think, oh, I can just go in and grab something, like, and rob someone or something like that, or they pass someone in the street and they're like, oh, they're alone, there's no cameras about, I can rob this person, take their money. So you end up getting kind of more impulsive decision making for short-term gratification. So because obviously, like, taking someone's phone, you're going to get what, like 200 quid out of that. Then you're putting that person in a lot of like distress and stuff like that. You're not thinking about those consequences. You're thinking about, I can get 200 quid and then go buy some whatever food, drugs, PlayStation, whatever you want. So yeah. That one's a big one, and it's linked into this thing called fast. It's called the fast life history. So life history is just your how quickly you develop in terms of like when you have sex, or when you start to make social bonds, or when you start to want to earn money, stuff like that. Yeah, so that's gotten longer as our lifespans have gotten longer, our life history. Yeah, so now you see people going into education into their 20s, might live at home into their 20s, and then leave home and then get a job in their like late 20s, buy a house in their 30s, have kids in their 30s and stuff. Whereas it used to be that would all happen in like the teens, and then they'd have kids in their early 20s, etc. So that's changed. But people who have a quick life history, so they might have sex young, they might get a job very young, or like be forced into labour because they're not doing very well at school, etc. Those people are more likely to commit crimes because they want to achieve the same amount as people who have a long life history, but their life expectancy is much lower. So areas where you see low life expectancy, you're more likely to see high levels of crime.
That's interesting, and I suppose they sort of go hand in hand as well. If there's a lower life expectancy, it could be because of the crime, but it also could cause the crime.
So it's kind of like a cycle. It's like being like a cycle. Yeah. So there's a couple of them. Childhood delinquency is a big risk factor for future offending behaviour.
Now, how are we defining delinquency there?
So antisocial behaviour, so that could be what's it called? When you break things in the community.
Vandalism?
Vandalism, yeah, vandalism, not attending school very much, like getting into fights, taking drugs early, smoking early, those kind of things.
Fair.
So antisocial childhood behaviour.
I'm feeling very attacked by this story.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, we've gone through executive function and delinquency.
So the things that actually prevent that from turning into offending behaviour in later life are like strong relationships. So if you have and this is usually romantic relationships. So if you have a strong marital or like common law wife type or husband type situation where you're kind of engaged in a romantic affair. Basically, those things, not a romantic affair, those things allow you to exhibit more social control because you have more to lose. So there's more risk involved in you acting in an antisocial way. You're more likely to act pro-socially because you don't want to lose those things. So those things are actually like a positive indicator, even if you've had a delinquent childhood. Whereas if you have delinquent childhood and you don't end up with that, you're more likely to keep offending.
Fair. Makes sense.
What else is there? So two things that I think are really key actually to offending behaviour are offence supportive attitudes, or you might call them what are you laughing at?
I was just reading a comment in the chat.
Show me it.
I will get it up. 1 second. So Steen says, interestingly, the socio-economic problem can be alleviated through Maslow's needs. Failed nurture is harder to fix. Or when you become the rock The Rock is the new atheist god. And Icarus is lying to everyone, saying that he was a good little angel boy. We know the truth. Sorry, please continue.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, a couple more things. We have offense supportive attitudes and I can never say this word. Criminogenic need. So offense supportive attitudes would be like, if I am an offender, I might think, for instance, if I set fires, I might think I have the ability to control fires really well. Yeah. And in reality, no one has it. Like, even firefighters would say that they don't have the ability to control fires really well. Yeah. Because fires are unpredictable, stuff like that. So that's an offense supportive attitude.
You'd have to be a firebender.
Exactly. Yeah. And criminogenic need is the reason that they're offending in the first place. So what is the reason that they're offending? So if somebody is a fire setter for like a local like businessman, and that person's paying them to go around setting fires in order to get insurance, the criminogenic need is the money.
Right.
If somebody's a fire setter because
they're a pyromaniac.
Well, that's very rare, so I'm not even going to talk about that. That's so
okay.
That's so unbelievably rare, pyromania, because pyromania involves them having like a fascination with fire, like a real almost a sexual fascination with fire. It's described as in like the thing, without any other reason for them to set a fire, which is so rare. It's like literally 99.9% of people.
You mean TV has lied to me?
Not pyromaniacs. There's almost no my lecturer at the University of Kent, because I do have a degree, despite what people will tell you, said that she's like a real expert in fire setting behavior, and she got asked to be interviewed for a TV program about pyromania, and she turned it down because she said, there's so few of them, there's literally no point. She said, I'm not going to talk about something that's so rare and make out like it's a really frequent occurrence. So I'm going to do the same thing. But someone might set it for like getting revenge, set fire for getting revenge.
Yep.
And the criminogenic need is then the interpersonal relationships and how they manage those interpersonal relationships and conflicts.
So you're saying that there could be someone who's an arsonist in the revenge sense. Every time they feel that they need to get revenge, the way they deal with it is by setting fire to a possession of this person they feel the need to get revenge against.
Yeah, or their house, or like, something like that. So yeah, so those two are the criminogenic need in both of those things are very different, but they might also have the same offense supportive attitude, that they can control fire really well. So
right.
That's a big part of like people's like ending behaviors, that they think that they have these thoughts that are irrational essentially around their behavior. So for instance, in like somebody who assaults people is violent, they might have an offense supportive attitude that that's the only way to resolve conflict.
Well, they can control their fists really well.
yeah, well, exactly. I'm like the best fighter. I would not fight.
Hey, Tyler, nice to have you here. So would you say that this tends to be with these sorts of crimes where someone is either committing arson or some form of violent or vandalistic crime? Would you say there's always this sort of control element as part of it?
I would say that's...
Or maybe that it gives them the power. That there's the control in the sense that it puts the ball in their court. And
yeah, there are specific offences where control and power and self-esteem, low self-esteem actually, play a big role in their offending behaviour. And in order to achieve that level of control or whatever, it tends to be that will be how they do it. And it is usually in like violent offences and stuff like that. So, fire could be one about control and about, having a spectacle. and having a like, because it's very bright, it's very obvious, being important. So yeah, it tends to be people that don't feel important will engage in these kind of behaviors. And the problem with all of this, including what we're going to talk to you about, like, in a bit about kind of like the criminal justice system and punishment and stuff like that, is that the people who get caught are the people who don't plan their offences very well, or who maybe, like, as I think I said before, 50% of the prison population have under average IQ, and 50% of them have some form of mental illness. Yeah, and the reason that you see,
and there's the crossover as well.
It's a mix and match, yeah. So it might be some people that have both. There might be some people that just have one. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is because the people who are likely to commit offences and get caught are more likely to have less than average IQ or have a mental illness. And that's why we see this over thing. But that doesn't mean that there aren't criminals doing the same thing who don't get caught, who are more intelligent and stuff. So all of the research is done on the prison population, because we know that they've committed an offence, so we do that, and so it's swayed towards the prison population's version. So with this stuff, we've got to bear in mind that the research doesn't necessarily take into account all of the offenders. It just takes into account the ones that we know of.
Yeah, the ones that get caught, as you said.
And so that's why power and control. That's why I'm talking about the power and control, because people with low self-esteem, people that don't feel very powerful, people that have limited importance in their community, people that have low IQ and who have mental illness, they're more likely to have that as a rationale for why they commit those offences. But it may be very different for someone who does the same offence, who is clever and has money and stuff like that, but can get away with it.
So what you're saying is, there might actually be more pyros than you realise. They basically got Iron Man style wealth.
Oh.
I bring it back round to the pyros because Tyler says, I used to pour gasoline on a tennis ball set. Set fire. Oh, sorry. There was a comma there that threw me off. On a tennis ball, set fire to it and kick it around with friends when I was younger. Was I a pyro?
No. And I'll tell you why. This is actually a different reason to what I said before, but there is expected to be fire play in children to like teenagers' life. So for somebody to be like a pyromaniac, they have to be out those stages of being interested and curious about fire, which is what is expected through developmental stages. There's always fire play in teenagers and children. Like,
that's interesting. We used to do the same similar thing ourselves. Yes, yeah. We used to do similar things ourselves. They used to, when I lived in Michigan, we always had the mosquito spray, because you're by the Great Lakes, so you'd almost everyone would have it with them, and we would spend a lot of time just pouring it into our hands or all over our hands and setting them alight and seeing how long it could go for, or writing our names in the street. Although there was this one guy, Steve, that showed me this trick. Where you got some gasoline and you got all the polystyrene stuff and filled up the gasoline with this, and it turned into this sludgy stuff. It just melted away into it, and then you could put it on a stick and literally it would stay alight for ages. Now, he used to say he used to do some really naughty things with this. I never saw him do it, and we never did that. We just used to put it on sticks and wave them around and stuff. But yeah, so it's good to know that the fire play is actually a natural part of development. I suppose you can understand that, though, because every new thing you always want to learn a little bit more about until you go, okay, well, yeah, that's done.
But you get burnt.
Yeah, well, that never bothered us back then, but yeah. Never seriously burnt. I'm sure if we had got seriously burnt, we'd have a fear.
And the thing is with fire as well is that we got to remember, because I think fire play happens with adults as well, but just like we call it a barbecue or a bonfire, right?
Yeah, that's true. Getting back to our roots.
Safe use of fire is normal in adult behavior as well. Like that's fine. We use it to cook. I think we got to remember that fire is a big part of our evolutionary transition into like being how we are now, and like so technologically like able and stuff like that. So I think we have a natural inclination towards fire as a species, And I think that is normal and natural to be able to be like, yeah, I want to have a bonfire, or I want to watch fireworks, or I want to use fire to cook. There's uses that it has that we shouldn't ignore. Like fire just isn't just bad. You know, I think a lot of people think fire's bad if you set fires, but actually we all do it.
Only bad if you're a zombie, really.
Yeah. From The Thing, specifically.
Mathpig says, I'm Northern Irish. Let's not talk about playing with fire or explosives at a younger age.
Well, that's a whole different bag. I haven't got any research on that, I'm afraid.
Cool. So, I mean, that explains those sort of more explosive sort of crimes, I guess, in some way, shape, or form. What about other crimes? I mean, what about someone that's, say, prone to dealing drugs? Is that purely about money, or is there something else that will go into that as well? Could that be a power thing? They want the status, they want people to look up to them, need them.
Yeah, so I think dealing drugs and that kind of like, because dealing drugs, I think, is closely associated with gang behavior. At least, at the very least, you'll be on the periphery of some like gang or something that, right? Yeah. But that strain theory is really the kind of one of the key ones that kind of explains that, about kind of like having that strain, being able to reach those goals in a legal way, so finding a different way, an illegal way of doing it. But there's other things like there's like a what's it called? On the name of it, but basically there's a couple of social learning theories, a really key one as well. So if you're in a group of people and you have authority figures in that group that are likely to be dealing drugs or to be acting aggressively or anything like that, you passively learn from those people that is an acceptable behavior, which is why, again, it's all about the young age. It's about kind of like, you know, if you see, it's why part of the reason why kids of smokers are more likely to smoke, regardless of, you know, if they've inhaled anything or have a nicotine addiction or not, because they've seen their parents do it at a young age, and they think that, okay, that's an acceptable way of doing it, or living. Social learning theory, I think, is really important, because it is so prevalent, and it's not just a process where people just copy. It's also people form their own attitudes based on attitudes of those people. So, for instance, if someone acts aggressively, child won't just copy the aggressive behavior, but they won't form their own aggressive behavior towards whatever they're aggressive towards in the study as a Bobo doll. So, which is why they say, you know, spanking and things like that are actually bad, because it will create violent behaviors, and if you punish violent behavior with a violent behavior, again, you're teaching them that violent behaviors are acceptable in certain cases. And then there's a theory that I can't remember the name of right this second, that merges two of these theories together to make one. So it's like a multifaceted view on it. It's really frustrating me that I can't.
Spice Girls theory. To become one.
Yeah, so basically it was like strain theory, and then the self-control theory, and then the social learning theory don't on their own explain everything, because, for instance, in strain theory, you'd expect every single kid in that environment under that strain to be acting in the same way. They don't, you know. There's like loads of kids that come up in those who are brought up in those kind of environments who then don't go on to offend. So there's a gap there. So if you combine all of these theories, then it kind of gives you a better outlook of like predicting who is more likely to.
Or is it that they're just good at it, so you don't know that they've offended? And I think, I mean, you could take a council estate in a really poor area and look at that, and not everybody that comes out of, you know, a council estate ends up being, as you say, committing these sorts of crimes. They go many different paths, and I think some of it might be like you say as well. You're finding that relationship or something that keeps them going. They don't want to lose that, and it inspires them to do better for themselves. Maybe knuckle down a little bit more.
And I do think there's a natural element to it as well, which, like, sociology would completely disagree with me on. But as a psychologist, there's an element of people being predisposed to certain types of behavior. So there might be people who are born who are predisposed to predisposed to not being able to control themselves, self-regulation, and then that means that if they're in an environment that doesn't teach them effective self-regulation, that will be exacerbated. The same thing with aggression. So people who are born who are predisposed to aggression, they're in an environment that encourages that behavior, then it will be exacerbated, and then that's it's kind of like that middle ground between nature and nurture, which gets lost in sociological theories, in my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Are there any other sorts of crimes that you wanted to address before we move on?
I mean, I wish I had more information on like white collar crime, but I think that that's a whole different kind of. The average prison population isn't that kind of criminal. It tends to be these more kind of like aggressive, violent offences that tend to be seen in prison. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to be helpful for this discussion per se.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the next thing you wanted to actually focus on was the UK justice system and how the UK justice system deals with, well, criminals.
Yeah, which is badly. In one word, just badly.
That's it. That's all we need.
There we go. Let's move on.
I think we could say that it might be better than some places, but in general, justice systems don't seem to give much justice.
Sorry, I'm just looking at all the different weed strains that are being discussed in the chat. It's not about weed strains, guys. Come on. Problem with the UK justice system is largely due to the short-term governments that are the short-term governmental system that we have. So we have 5 years. 5 years between. Yeah, I know my stuff. Between between general elections, and 2 of those years at the end are people trying to make sure that they got votes for the next election. And so what
tough
they
on
want to
crime.
show, yeah, exactly. They want to show that they're tough on crime, and they'll pick a crime. That do you guys know moral panics?
Yeah.
Devils. So a moral panic is like, say, okay, I think the Sarah Everard situation is a really great example of a moral panic that's happening at the moment. So Sarah Everard was obviously murdered by a Metropolitan Police officer. Since then, there's been a lot of kind of like discussion around the Met and plainclothes police officers stopping women in the street and that kind of thing. Yeah, because of this one guy and this one event. If we looked at the statistics, and I'm not saying that just to clarify, I'm not saying that any of the concerns that women have about being stopped by a plainclothes police officer are wrong in any way. I think that actually it's moving towards a better system, and I prefer it. But what's happened is that because of this one event, if we looked at the statistics and the amount of Metropolitan Police officers that were at risk of murdering someone, it's very low. Yeah. So what's been created by the media is this moral panic where people are now starting to become scared of plainclothes police officers on their own in the street at night or in clubs, which they somehow, for some reason, introduced immediately after Sarah Everard's when she went missing, which was a bizarre decision by the Met. I don't understand why they did that. Very bad timing on their part. So that's what a moral panic is. It's where the media kind of like report on something so much that it seems really frequent when actually it's a really rare occurrence. And usually you get that because the news is supposed to shock you. It's supposed to be a story. You don't hear about all of the other kind of offences that are happening day to day that actually are more frequent and more risky towards people, generally speaking.
I mean, to put that into context, the same can be said about a lot of the drug stories that you hear. and how safe they are in comparison to something like alcohol.
Yeah.
There are so many deaths related to alcohol, caused directly and sometimes indirectly by alcohol. Some very quick deaths, some very slow deaths. And in comparison to drugs, there's hardly any. But people hear the stories in the news, and they come up like, "Oh, it's the worst thing in the world. She only had one pill," and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of these stories negate the fact that actually this person was incredibly drunk in the first place, and it was probably the fact that she had the alcohol plus the drug, and her friends didn't look after her, and so on and so forth. That is actually the problem. And there's this entire panic about the drugs because of, as you say, this sort of panic that is caused by the media. It's very, very misrepresented. News isn't necessarily news. It's more...
No, exactly.
Oh, what's going to get you to buy us,
Rhetoric.
to read us, to...
Rhetoric, yeah. It's rhetorical.
Yeah,
It's trying to
good
persuade
example.
people.
Well, good example is QAnon. The loud guy, the fat guy. What's his name? The frogs guy.
I'm not good with names at the best of times, Dave.
Yeah, he's like a fat guy who said that frogs were changing sexes, and there was like stuff making frogs gay in the water.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
It's not drinking water. It's making you gay.
yeah.
Stop.
Alex Jones.
Oh,
Right, yeah.
They thrive on that sort of moral panic, and it's how they sell stories, and that's what gives us things like Pizzagate. And another moral panic at the moment is, of course, transgender.
yes, yeah, that's a really good example actually. So what happens is, like, so there was the war on drugs in the 70s,
Yeah, and 80s, and 90s.
and 80s, and 90s, and 2000s, and 2010s,
Yeah,
2020s.
it's an easy one to go to.
Yeah, and that was created by a moral panic about the effect that drugs would have on a community, especially marijuana. A lot of it was racist.
Reefer madness.
Yeah, because they put harder sentences and more stringent policing on drugs that black people used, whilst cocaine and stuff in like upper class, middle class suburbia, white suburbia, wasn't as stringently policed. Still isn't in places like London, where it's cocaine central. So it's interesting, so that's moral panics are created, and then the government say we're going to fight this moral panic, we're going to punish it really hard, and they get votes.
Yeah,
And that is the infrastructure of the justice system.
That's
the backbone of it.
Anecdote from Kimmo. Hi, Kimmo, by the way. I didn't see you come in. While bartending, I was constantly amazed that the reason almost everyone who cut themselves off did so out of fear of losing their driving license and not the fear of killing people. I mean, is that a priorities thing? For them, or is it just the fact that they hear of other people losing their driving license more than they hear of killing people?
it's self-interesting.
Do you think
Yeah,
so?
it's probably an abstract concept as well. Like, killing someone isn't something that happens to you; it's something that happens to other people.
Whereas the driving
losing
license
a driving
is
license is more a realistic expectation that they have.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, that's sort of like the backbone of a lot of the justice system. But is there anything specifically you wanted to discuss about the process, maybe through the courts or anything like that?
So off the backbone, you have the actual system, which the Home Office acknowledge that rehabilitation is necessary for the infrastructure to work, because if you keep having new criminals made, we have an aging population, we have a very limited amount of places for prison. Prison population is already overcrowded, and we have people keep coming back into the system, and then new people coming in as well. It's obviously going to get overwhelmed. But they acknowledge that actually rehabilitation is a strategy that we ought to use, but they've allowed it to get so overcrowded and relinquish the resources, just like they have in the NHS and other places. So rehabilitation is really unlikely to happen. So this process is punishment as a concept is actually well, I was doing some reading before from this book. This book is great, by the way. Forensic Psychology: Concepts, Debates, and Practice. And there's one by a woman called Sarah Marsden called "What Role Does Punishment Play in Deterring Crime?" And in it, she discusses how punishment is a nostalgic view about how we should do things, rather than like actually how we should do things based on research. So it's just this nostalgic view of, throw them in the cell, lock them away, throw away the key, give them bread and water for their lives. And that's nostalgic. And people
still hear that said today.
Yeah, by the public, and then therefore by politicians who want the public's vote. So the actual process is just punishment rather than punishment and rehabilitation, and they put these things in place that make it appear like there's rehabilitation within prison services, but it's so minimal that it's really not that possible. So recidivism rates, which is reoffending rates, have been the same for the last 50 years. They haven't changed, despite the fact that we have better technology, better infrastructure, better research.
That's really awful.
Yeah.
A lot of criminals just call prison campus or university.
Yeah.
Or a business, opportunity.
Yeah, because they can learn some skills whilst they're in there.
Make new contacts and yeah.
And the other thing that's a real issue with UK criminal justice system is that it doesn't take into account any of this research that we just discussed about why criminality occurs. It's based purely off it assumes that people have a cost-benefit analysis when they commit a crime. So do the costs outweigh the benefits? And if not, then they'll commit the crime. And that assumes that everyone has the potential to be a criminal. And that's like how the criminal justice system approaches people who have committed crimes. They're opportunistic and they've done this cost-benefit analysis and that it didn't pay out for them.
So it doesn't take into account anything like mental health and so on and so forth. And apart from, I suppose, in rare cases where you get the insanity plea because someone is clearly, not right in that regard.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we've lost you, Dave. You're frozen on us.
Back.
You're back in the room, Dave.
I was just going to say, you've got cases like somebody like Peter Sutcliffe where they're thrown into, a special prison because they'll never be rehabilitated or anything like that.
Well, he was in secure. He apparently had schizophrenia for years.
Yeah, and he was in a secure wing of Broadmoor.
Yeah. So for me, basically, they brought in this thing in the early 2010s called IPPs, which is like an indefinite prison sentence. So you can get 4.5 years and then you have an indefinite sentence. So you could be held in prison for a lot longer. And I think that because Peter Sutcliffe went into prison before that, they kind of almost forced the schizophrenia thing in order to make sure that he didn't get released.
Yeah.
Because before that, I think that was very rare for people to have whole life sentences. And it was easier for people to be held in secure hospitals for long periods of time. So I think that was a bit of a play by the courts, and that he didn't actually because then they moved him just before he died. They moved him to prison because they were like, actually, he doesn't have schizophrenia.
He'll be dead soon.
Why has he been in secure hospitals all this time? Yeah, exactly.
So Joe was about to pick a fight with somebody at the side there.
No. I was just refreshing myself on who Peter Sutcliffe was. I couldn't remember. Ripper. Yes,
the hammer guy.
Also looks a little bit like Steve Coogan in a way.
He very much like the London Ripper, Jack the Ripper. Should have been caught multiple times, and the police had opportunities to catch him multiple times, and then failed because of administrative issues.
And because the guy in charge thought he already had the right theory, and anything that
Yes.
didn't go against the theory.
And it was always this person who sent a letter in or a tape, like in the Yorkshire Ripper case, it was a person who sent a tape in, and they were like, well, he has a Liverpudlian accent, so we need to follow
Geordie.
the guy we're looking for. Yeah, Geordie. The guy we're looking for has a Geordie accent, so we need to find that. And Peter Sutcliffe was a high priority, like he was a real suspect. And they were like, but he doesn't have a Geordie accent. And that's
They even
why
interviewed him 3 times.
Yes. The same thing that happened with the Ripper is that they had these letters come through and they followed that lead and they missed all the other leads that were going on. They didn't catch the London Ripper. Anyway, that was a bit of a segue. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise. Still relevant. More relevant than most of our segues.
That's true.
So, in other words, the UK justice system doesn't focus really on rehabilitation at all, even though it might say it does. That's why we have a lot of reoccurrences, and as you say, it assumes everyone makes the same cost-benefit analysis whilst deciding if they're going to commit the crime. I mean, as you mentioned at the start, some people are just impulsive. They do the thing. They don't even consider that it's a crime. They just do the thing. So it's not taking into account that there is all people are different. They have very different psychologies, and therefore the same punishment isn't going to work either.
Well, punishment isn't going to work. So reason that they
sorry, what I was going to say is even if punishment was something that could work for someone, people are so different that the same punishment wouldn't work for everyone. As people, we don't fit into these little boxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
We've moved beyond phrenology, which is something.
That is true. Yeah, the characteristic of being able to identify an offender by how they look is long gone. Although long gone. Actually, no, it's not long gone at all.
If you're dressed like a certain way or have certain tattoos,
If you go into court and you're good looking and you're wearing a suit, you're more likely to be let off.
Yeah.
Be found not guilty than if you're not very good looking and you're wearing normal people clothes.
Show up in your trackies and
you're more likely to be convicted. Even that's not just with juries. Do you think that would just be with laymen, people who aren't used to criminal justice? That includes judges. Judges have exactly the same thing.
Funny, isn't it? It's the whole "don't trust a book by its cover." I remember there's stories. Even a town I used to live in, Caterham. I don't know if you've heard of the Caterham 7.
No.
So it's a little sports car type thing. But there was a guy that went into that shop and he basically was dressed sort of how I dress on the day-to-day, like complete scruff bag. And no one was serving him. And, it turns out that the guy had millions and they lost out on a sale because of it, just because they judged him by how he looked. And we do that a lot. We judge people how they look all the time. In fact, it's one of those things that I used to like doing, getting really sort of like got my long black leather jacket on and everything like that when I was younger, proper metalhead, piercings everywhere, and going and being really polite to people and having people look at you like, what's going on? Like trying to break down this barrier. It's quite entertaining. Sorry,
true.
Another segue.
That was another segue.
So the short of it is the UK justice system doesn't do much to help people. As you say, punishment won't work, and even if it was going to work, the same punishment wouldn't work on everyone. So what about things... Sorry.
Can I just add, to the punishment stuff? Because the punishment stuff is very interesting, actually. So punishment as a concept is just completely ridiculous. Because so I think Icarus says about people fear the punishment more than they fear regular consequences. And that's not true. Punishment doesn't work as a deterrent. There's nothing about punishment in terms of like criminality and criminal behavior where like a harsher sentence or a like like even if it was like to do with like corporal punishment or capital punishment, they don't act as deterrents. They're supposed to act as deterrents.
Can it though?
They just don't work.
Can it though for someone who was, let's just say someone who's not particularly criminally minded, they just, for whatever reason, they really want to kick someone's head in. They want some revenge. Maybe someone stole their partner or destroyed their car or dobbed them in at work, and they get really angry and they want to kick their head in, but they don't because they go, well, it's not worth going to jail for. In some respects, the punishment of going to jail can be a deterrent, but only for the people who were generally not going to be the sort to commit crimes.
I don't think it's the punishment of prison that would be the driving factor in that decision. I think it would be one, the potential harm that you're causing someone else. You'd feel guilty about, regardless of whether you really hate that person or not. You know,
you might after the fact, but not beforehand.
Well, but like if it's a really extreme behavior, like kicking someone's head in, you'd probably be like, I don't really want to hurt someone. Like, I'll go give them a word, but most people wouldn't want to actually inflict a violent act on someone because of the way that they got brought up with these kind of like thinking about long-term consequences and stuff. Not just prison, but also just like how they feel about things, right? And the impact that might have on that other person's life. But I think also it's not prison that is the punishment. It's the loss of your family, your friends, your stuff like that. The actual punishment, which is prison, isn't a punishment for people that don't have strong familial bonds or things that are engaged with things.
No, I agree.
Really
I agree in that. I mean, the whole thought of prison is the fact that you lose all of that if you've got those strong bonds and stuff there.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in prison because you've got all of this that you will miss out on for X amount of time, possibly forever.
Exactly, yeah. So it's kind of like, you know, if you're being tough on something, even if you introduce like the death penalty and stuff, like people that lack any kind of like the people that are more likely to commit crimes are the people that lack those things anyway.
Yeah. So it won't be a deterrent for them. But there's a chance that it could be a deterrent for someone. Let's just say like me or you.
Anyway, regardless of what the punishment is, because of the potential. Because if I go and kick someone's head in, my partner's not going to think I'm a very nice person and might break up with me.
They might not find out it's you.
See what I mean? No, like,
but you're a smart guy. You could get away with
it. Those things are risks anyway.
I know about the bodies.
Told you not to say anyone. So those things are you know, there's like kind of the punishment that we'll inflict on ourselves is almost worse than prison anyway, in my opinion.
There's a question from Philip saying, is there really zero difference between different forms of punishment?
The research suggests that there's no difference. That punishment, any kind of punishment, does not have a significant effect on someone's likeliness to offend, regardless of what punishment you.
And is that due to, as you mentioned, the ties that people have? So
the reason someone's a criminal anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So if somebody's going to act in an offending way, they're going to act in it regardless of what punishment you have, and it's usually down to that self-control aspect. You know, they're thinking impulsively. They're not thinking long-term. They're not thinking about the consequences. They're probably not thinking they're going to get caught. There's other strains on them. So it's either I do this thing and enjoy this part of my life, and then get thrown in prison if that happens. But at least I've made a name for myself, or at least I've done this thing. So there's all these theories that lead to criminal behavior are the reasons why punishment doesn't work.
So, I mean, again, you mentioned that this is just based on the people that have been caught, though, really, because the people who haven't been caught, you've got no data on. So everything that is being said, there's zero difference between the different forms of punishment based on the people that get caught. So the research is all done on them. So there's the unknown factor where maybe the different forms of punishment might deter people, but it's still unlikely because of the attachments that people might have. Oh, you've gone again, Dave.
It also makes smarter. Damn it.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with
certain punishments also make for smarter criminals. because they do want to avoid those punishments, so therefore they figure out how to commit the crimes better.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Well, saying that, I suppose if regardless of what the punishment is, right? I'm trying to figure out a scenario in my head. You have, have you ever pirated anything? Either of you?
I can't confirm or
have I
deny.
ever pirated anything? At
So,
about 13, I was going around selling pirate videos and pirate software.
Oh, okay. So imagine that the police there was a moral panic about pirating stuff, and the police started to crack down on it.
You wouldn't steal a house.
Yeah, well, precisely, right? Piracy is a crime. You're going to go to jail for it. Yeah. Would you one, stop pirating, even though because the punishment is harsher? Would you two find, I don't know, something like a VPN or something like that can help you pirate without being caught?
Yes.
That's a logical answer like that.
I would go with the second option.
Yeah.
Or I'd just do it smarter.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. And that's not so the punishment is increased, but you're still acting in the behaviour that you would. And that's exactly what the same thing. It's the same thing for other criminal behaviours, because that is a criminal behaviour, guys. I'm just letting you know.
Although if they turned around and actually made the death penalty out of piracy, I might consider that it's really not a risk worth taking.
Is that because of the cost benefit? No, I'm just kidding. Is that because well, no, it is because of the cost. It is the cost benefit
analysis. Yeah. There's a logical element that's in there, and there is a certain point for me and for my experiences. But yeah, I have more to lose, and this is why I was having the conversation when I was earlier about. Are there actually some punishments? Because there are times where I've thought to myself, if it wasn't for the fact that I could go to prison, I would do this thing. Generally, when I've been in an incredibly bad mood, someone's done something absolutely awful to me, and I want to hurt them because I'm in that mood. But I haven't done. And even though in a normal state, I do my best to be a good moral being, there are times where I'm in a state where I go, fuck that shit, I don't care. I want to hurt that person. But I'm not going to, because there's this consequence where, as you say, it is because I'll lose my family and so on and so forth. But I guess
this is a weird thing, isn't it? Sorry, go on.
I would say that there are times, this is purely anecdotal, but there are times where the punishment has stopped me from doing the thing.
Right, and I think that is probably like a generic individual's approach to it. Like for people who are likely to be offending, like if we offend once or twice, we're probably not going to end up getting caught or going to jail for it, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's a really extreme offence that we get caught for. But I would say that criminal behaviour, generally speaking, isn't influenced by the punishment at the end of the road, and I think that's why you don't see like when the war on drugs started happening, you didn't see a decrease in drug use, number of drug use. You just saw more people going to prison for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why, when the death penalty was around in biblical times for various ridiculous things, people still engaged in those behaviours. Why there are still people who are like atheists in extremely religious countries where atheism has the death penalty. It's those that would be a criminogenic need in that country, right? The criminogenic need is to be true to oneself, and because I can't believe in something I don't believe in.
Yep.
Right?
You can't choose what to believe.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be a criminogenic need in that scenario. And they still do it. They still engage in it. Real atheology has people who are risking a lot for imprisonment and stuff for that value. And I'm not saying that I don't think they're criminals, but their state would think they were criminals, and they have a criminogenic need, psychologically speaking, and that supersedes any punishment that they would be. That's why punishment doesn't work. It's a criminogenic need, the offence supportive attitudes, and the other psychological theories that are based over it that we talked about earlier. supersede any kind of punishment that affects it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, thank you for subscribing, Sandy. So
It's counterintuitive, though, isn't it? You'd think that punishment would would prevent recidivism, but it doesn't.
But you're basing it. I mean, people are basing it on themselves, and generally, the sort of people who are thinking about this are the sort who generally wouldn't
criminals.
commit the crime. You know, they're not criminals. And yes, for like I mentioned, a few anecdotal experiences I've had where I probably was close to doing the thing. You know, it's not like I'm the sort of person who it's part of my pathology. It's actually a rare occurrence to me, and that's probably why it doesn't affect the stats all that much. It's why you say that there's nearly no difference between the types of punishment that are there, is because in general it makes no real difference, even if there are outliers like me who might have done the thing, but didn't.
And that's the thing. Punishment isn't a deterrent. It's not a deterrent. It doesn't act in that way. That's the intuitive approach that governments take in order to get votes. That people don't want to be punished. Punishment acts as a deterrent. We're acting hard on this thing, but then it's all superficial, and that's what the UK government has done as well. And that's why we've led to overcrowded prisons, where recidivism hasn't changed in 50 odd years, and actual criminal behaviour hasn't been addressed properly because it's not been done systemically in a way that the research should suggest. Which brings me on to my next point about restorative justice, because restorative justice seems like a really good idea, right? So does everyone know what restorative justice is?
As in... Oh, no, I thought you were going to say retributive justice. Restorative justice? No, what's that?
Sort of an eye for an eye principle.
Oh, so same sort of thing. Okay.
Well, so it would be that you have the person who's committed the crime in prison, doing time for the crime, and then after a certain amount of time, when that person starts to feel remorse for their actions, they'll bring the victim or the family of the victim in to have a conversation about how that's made them feel, and begin to build a bridge between them, potentially get some forgiveness, etc., to allow that person to process and to actually see the impact that they've had on their victim through their actions.
Right.
The idea is that you're building a bridge.
So it's not retributive justice. It's actually trying to build restore. A relationship. Yeah, restore sort of things.
Yeah, yeah. But but it has some issues with it, because the way that we do it in a very superficial way to act like we're doing rehabilitative work, right? So we bring the families in, and it acts as reintegration shaming. People then begin to feel shame for their actions, and shame is not good. If you want to build somebody's self-esteem and build their character and build their strengths and have them be a better citizen, shame is not a feeling that you want them to be having. That really doesn't help. So what it does is it communicates disapproval to the transgressor and causes them to feel shame, and actually prevents them from progressing, because they feel like they can't reintegrate with society because they've done such a bad thing. They've impacted this person so much that their self-esteem essentially breaks down, and then they see what's the point in even trying to become a better person. So it doesn't actually work.
It doesn't at all. No,
it has worked. It works better than just pure punishment, but it's not as good as other strategies, and it's certainly not as good as it certainly doesn't fulfill what it claims it fulfills.
Mm.
It has big issues with it.
Is it because largely people just don't care?
No, it's because they end up feeling shame, and that's not a way to have someone.
Right. Yeah.
Like, if you want someone to not offend again, they need to feel like they can become a valued member of society and have a role and importance. Because if we're thinking about the reasons that people offended before, it's about not having roles, having strains on themselves, lacking self-control and stuff. And if you start to introduce shame into that and have families meet them and make them feel really bad about their actions, then that's going to end up being a barrier rather than progress.
It ends up
Sort of
being
like
another form
keep
of
the
punishment.
cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's one of these things that the Home Office have tried to introduce to make it look like they're doing rehabilitation work. Actually, it's the
Doesn't work either.
research suggests it's not effective. Yeah, and actually it can also re-traumatize the victims as well.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. I mean, depending on the crime, definitely imagine it re-traumatizes the victims. It's incredibly hard for them to go through that sort of thing.
It can, if there is forgiveness, it can have a positive effect. If there is that bridge is built, it can have a positive effect. There are stories about how somebody went along to a restorative justice session and then they came out and then they ended up supporting each other and having more conversations and visiting each other and stuff like. Well, the family was visiting the person in prison, but that's not common. I don't think that's not a common approach because most people feel really bitter towards somebody who's defended against them, right?
Yeah. Well,
have you guys seen Time with Sean Bean?
No.
Oh, it's really good. It's like a limited series. It should be it should be watched. Basically, they present a restorative justice session in there where this guy murdered these parents' child. He wasn't a child; he was an adult, but he killed him in a fight. And I asked him why, and it was over 25p or something because he didn't want to be embarrassed. He wanted to seem important, and he didn't have the money for something or something like that. Yeah. Then they were like, "You killed him over 25p," and they got really angry and said, "We can never forgive you" and stuff. And it was really detrimental to that character because he then went back and started doing drugs and started engaging with the gangs in the prison because it was like, "There's no point now. I'm worthless. I did this thing for no reason. There's no way I can reintegrate with society." And then it had a detrimental impact on his thing, and I think that that's probably a really accurate portrayal of what restorative justice can be like. People.
Actually, gonna address a few comments from the chat before we move on. Kimo made a comment earlier that I did want to get to. I know a fair number of homeless guys who'll commit some crime that's just petty enough to send them to jail for the winter months.
Yeah, no, that's really frequent.
It that says something about society, doesn't it? Really, where actually going to jail is the better option than
being cold in the street.
Yeah.
What is being done for these people? When I worked on a ward, would have people do that. They'd pretend they'd know exactly what to say to get admitted to a hospital.
It's really awful when you think about it. But then you sit back and go, well, what can we do about that? And we don't have the power to really make any positive changes in that regard ourselves, do we?
Especially when your government demonizes homeless people instead of helps them.
Yeah, exactly. Comment from Randolph. Hey Randolph, how you doing? He says, what does it say about a person's character that they need punishment to be a deterrent from committing a criminal act? I find that most people in society don't need such a crutch at all, and I think you're right there. It's a case of, as Luke was saying earlier, the sort of people who are going to commit crime are going to commit crime regardless of punishment. There might be a few outliers where, as I was mentioning, you're feeling like you're losing it, and you think that maybe you should do this terrible thing, and then you go through the cost benefit analysis and you go, no, actually I don't want to lose what I've got. What does it say about that person? Does it say that they have a bit of control and they realize that they could lose something? Yeah, I mean, it shows. I mean, I know I was talking about myself, and I shows it that there is a negative quality in my character there. There have been times when I've been pushed to breaking point, and one of the considerations that stopped me from snapping and losing it was actually going, right, let's have a think about all the things that could happen if I actually did this thing. Steen says, "Are we saying criminals can't be fixed?" No, we haven't got to that point yet, Steen.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
I mean, Luke did mention earlier about, stronger family bonds and stronger romantic relationships can actually help change the path of a criminal. Maybe not a career criminal, but
even a career criminal.
Yeah.
Depends on how much they rely on that career for their lifestyle.
That's true. Yes.
And how much they can get away with and get out the gang.
Yeah.
Most mafia members are married.
Well, see, those are the types of criminals that there's very little research on.
Because they're
types of people,
less chance of getting caught.
It's really hard to do research on people who aren't in institutions where they almost have to have that interaction. So
if there are any career criminals out there that would be willing to submit themselves to a study for, please contact Bearded Heretic.
Please, you'll make me famous.
Yeah.
The first thing you learn is never talk to anybody. Not outside your circle, anyway.
Yeah.
But to get back to your question, Steen, no, at the moment we're talking about the things that don't work, that definitely don't work, and the reasons why people might commit crimes in the first place. So, in that regards, are we ready to move on to some things that work, or maybe look at some other systems? Or
yeah, absolutely. Let's look at what works.
Cool.
It says in the description, because I have it up so I remember what the list is. Non-prison based sentences, community service or fines, right? So let's just get fines out of the way. Fines don't work. They're a punishment. They only really impact on people who don't have money. So the more money you make, the less likely you are to be worried about a fine.
Yeah, I mean,
even if
that's
it is a percentage of your like salary, like the more you make, the less a percentage. Like if it's 5% of your salary, that's going to matter less the more you make, because you can still live off the other 95%, right?
Yeah.
So
it almost needs to be a percentage of your total net worth and your salary involved in that, doesn't it? If it was to be at least somewhat effective, a millionaire getting even 100,000 fine, it would just be like, oh, well, that's annoying. Not going to be able to get my new jet ski next week.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. So fines don't work. I just see them. I think they are money-making tools for the government. That's about it, really.
That they're supposed to use to fix the roads, and they never do.
That's because Tories are using it to buy cocaine.
Yeah. They are. That's true. There's research on that. So community service is actually a really effective tool. There's more effective tools, obviously, but community service is something that allows somebody to feel important in a different setting for a period of time. And I'm not talking really like the stupid like litter picking community service, but there's community service based interventions where people go and actually work somewhere, at a real place for a period of time. And that actually helps them build skills and engage in the community in an effective way, whilst they're under a probation officer. So there's oversight there, and it allows them to actually interact with people. And the person who is employing them technically can then choose to employ them past that point as well, past the point where if they do a good enough job. So
what sort of things,
really
like soup kitchens or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. There was one that I got a bike made for me. From a guy who exclusively employed people who were on community service orders, and they just went in there and they built bikes for people, and people bought the bikes. They built them from like scrapped bikes and stuff. So people donated them, and it's exclusively run by people who were under community service orders. And it was really good, and the bikes were really good, and they got stuff out of it. You could tell they really enjoyed their work. And even though there was multiple criminals there, it didn't have that same feeling that you get when you're talking about like prisons being a university, because everyone was there engaging in a task that was meaningful, and able to live in the community as like normal people whilst they were doing that. whilst probation was watching them, obviously, so making sure that they didn't do anything wrong. But the reason that those people didn't go to prison wasn't because they were worried about going to prison. It was because they were doing something that meant something, and that's the difference. They felt important in a way that they didn't feel important in their normal lives. They're contributing to something, which I think is really the key goal.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like you mentioned earlier, quite often there's the feeling of worthlessness that informs part of it, and as they're contributing, and they're part of a team sometimes, and so they're not just contributing something physical like the item, but they're contributing something on a more emotional level as well, and they're receiving something on an emotional level, building bonds with people. Even if they're all other criminals, they're all having this positive experience, which can make them feel better about themselves and go, actually, I could be in this environment and not have to commit the crime.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. But they're still not the most effective system. So it's very good, but obviously you get people that don't give a crap, who continue to live in that kind of environment where like that strain is on them still, that they still have peers that are engaging in that behavior whilst they're out in the community. So what is the real key? And this is where like cost is really like an issue, because the real key is rehab is specifically focused on their criminogenic needs and their offense supportive attitudes. Because if you access both of those, if you say, look, okay, your criminogenic need is a need to feel important, or your criminogenic need is a need to make money. If you can do it in a different way, you do some therapy around that and find them a different way of doing it. If they get rid of their criminogenic need, then there's no reason for them to commit the crime.
And so in that regard, you can turn a criminal into a non-criminal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're literally taking away the need. And the offense supportive attitudes usually is something that they've grown up with. So if you can show them through therapeutic intervention that, actually you can't control fire because of X, Y, and Z, do some education around that. Do some education around appropriate responses to somebody, disrespecting you, rather than setting fire to the house or something like that. And you can then reduce their offending behavior as well, get rid of their offending behavior as well. So if you access those two things and replace those things with pro-social behaviors through therapeutic intervention, then there wouldn't be any reason for them to be offending in the first place.
So, Steen, does that answer your question? You can change a criminal into being a non-criminal. And yeah, there's a few different things that we're going to mention, but as Luke says, there's two main points to focus on, and if you can access both of those, then you can change them. Randolph says, on fixing the roads, I read in the news a few years ago about some guy in the UK who was spray painting human nudity into potholes, and the government made fixing those a priority.
That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I didn't hear of this though, did you?
No, I haven't heard that.
Dave? So, okay, I mean, maybe this story didn't actually happen, but it's an idea. It's a really good idea. Although, Randolph says, the government got too many complaints, but it was definitely clever. But it still counts as vandalism. Now,
but that's a criminogenic need.
It is a criminogenic need. And actually, the government could resolve this by actually fixing the roads.
Yeah.
Do we think, from not a legal standpoint, but from a moral standpoint, that it's acceptable to do that?
Yes.
Good. Kimmo says occupy potholes. That could be one way to do it. It's just everybody goes and just sits in a pothole until it's fixed.
I live in Wales, so all we've got is dirt roads anyway.
But you made a good point, actually, Joe, just then, about how, if the government just did their job and filled the potholes in, then that criminogenic need wouldn't be present. And that is the same thing with education, with socioeconomic disparity, with job job market, everything. If they sorted out those issues, which is very much within their power to do, then a lot of offending behaviour would be like they wouldn't need to be tough on crime because there'd be very little crime. Like you see in other countries, like the rate of crime in this country is much higher than in like places in Scandinavia, for instance, because they have these things sorted out. They have a better education system. They have a better kind of like or a smaller disparity between the classes, and they're happier in general because of that. And it just that's for me the real source of everything to do with what we're talking about in terms of removing criminogenic need. It starts from there.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of the freaking potholes.
Yeah. That'll sort out some vandalism. So basically, as you mentioned, a large portion of crime that could actually be sorted out by the government's actually improving a lot of the country's infrastructure to make it in a short way. So then you'd generally be left with crime that was more impulse driven, I guess.
Not just that. Decriminalize a lot of drugs, and that'll resolve a lot of crime.
Because what you do then, you put drugs into pharmacies where it's controlled. You take it out of the gangs' hands and their control, and their funding reduces massively, which then leads to them not being able to fund their other kind of like enterprises such as people trafficking, etc. And you'll just get less of that as well. It's shockingly like it makes sense, but it's just that because if they suggested decriminalizing drugs, they wouldn't get votes automatically. You know,
it's crazy,
it's
isn't
like
it?
they just won't do it. Yeah, they just won't touch it.
And
you can
another thing with decriminalizing drugs is that there would be a lot more money staying in the UK.
Yes.
Because a lot of black money goes out of the country and never comes back.
Black market money.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, dark money, money hidden.
Well, in the same way that smoking, there's so much tax on things like cigarettes, and that the NHS will actually say smokers more than pay for their own treatment if they end up getting lung cancer and stuff like that. That actually, the tax that you get from something like smoking helps the NHS, even though it puts a bit of a strain on it as well. The net result is they get enough money from smokers. Now, I don't know how that is now that obviously we've got more and more people not smoking. But in that regard, the same sort of thing could be done with drugs as well. People would, it would be taxed. It could feed the NHS. It could pay for rehab centres and things like that. So it's a completely taxable market that, if tapped, could be highly beneficial. And as you say, the decriminalisation of it would reduce crime, because obviously they've been decriminalised / legalised in the first place, so no crimes are going to be committed there. But as you say, it's taken out of gang hands and all of that sort of thing.
It would also lead to a lot less like heroin use. Because a lot of the time people will have the heroin pushed on them when they go to dealers, and your local pharmacist isn't likely to go, well, we've got no weed. How about trying this little wrap? Yeah, do you want to try this little 10 bag?
They might even have the opportunity to say, well, what's your purpose for this particular drug? Oh, right, okay, you're struggling with sleep or whatever. Well, have you tried this? And recommend you something better. Or they could have different strains of weed in there, maybe high CBD strains, because it's more relaxing, so on and so forth. Definitely. So something that would solve a lot of problems, criminally speaking, would be the government making big changes, and in some cases just doing the jobs that they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So if we think about other countries, you mentioned Scandinavia and people being generally happier and so on and so forth. Their prison system's quite different as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't know too much about their prison system. I know that they have less sentences in general. They have more like community service based things. They actually have a couple of communities as well of offenders. So rather than people being sent to prison, they get sent to these communities where they still have a role. Like it runs as a normal community. It's just everyone's an offender, and then but because they're in a community where they're valued, and to see that community running quite well, which is really, and it almost acts like practice for them to be in
A proper community.
a proper community. So it's really interesting because as soon as people start to be valued, they have a role within the community, they have a responsibility, and if they don't fulfill that responsibility, then the community will fail or something like that. People start to step up and they start to engage with it appropriately, and you tend to get less of this kind of like people trying to make an impact in a way that is negative or antisocial. So that works a lot more. So I think that their prisons aren't as like chocker as ours. They're not overburdened in their prisons, and their prisons are really for only really serious people that need to be removed from society because of the risk they pose, which is totally understand. Sometimes that's necessary. I totally agree with that. Sometimes that is necessary because you need to be able to keep the community safe first and foremost. But you also need to be thinking, this person's going to be released at some point. We can't hold them forever. How are we going to make sure that this person is a valued member of society when they get reintroduced?
So in that regard, you mentioned there's some people that just say they can't be rehabilitated. In that regard, would you, let's just say they've committed a number of very, very serious crimes, would you be in favour of any form of capital punishment?
No, I would never be in favour of capital punishment. Capital punishment is off the cards because killing someone is as bad as killing someone, regardless of the rationale behind that, in my opinion. So I think I would be more inclined for, if they were truly treatment resistant, which some people are, and their risk is deemed to be too high by professionals who are competent, then continued segregation from the community I would be okay with. But I wouldn't be okay with it if there wasn't safeguards in place to try and like make sure that that person is actually treatment resistant and is being assessed by competent professionals.
Yeah, that's fair. Steen's just asked a question back on the drugs point. He said, we agreed earlier that kids with smoking families are more likely to smoke. So by legalizing genuine harmful substances, are we not normalizing them and risk having kids gain earlier access or use? Now, it's funny that you say that. I've got an experience of when I lived in America. And over there, the drinking age is 21, and it's 21, it's 21, it's 21. Now, in the UK, there is a very variable drinking age. So to
14
buy
to 18.
Yeah, so to buy it yourself, it's 18, but in a restaurant, it can be 14 to 18. In your own home, though, the actual age is 5. So you can drink alcohol in your own home legally from the age of 5.
Isn't it like wine or beer, though? Like, you can't have spirits or something.
You can't have spirits.
Yeah.
So a lot of families who, might be a bit easier with it, might let you have the odd drink and things like that. So when you're finally able to drink, it's not such a, oh, wow. You might see your parents having a drink in the evening, and then occasionally you're allowed a little drink with a meal or in the evening or something like that. And you grow up not necessarily going absolutely wild. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of people that do go completely mad for it, and they tend to be from families where they didn't have this sort of slow interaction to it. Now, when I lived out in the States, however, as I said, the law was 21, 21, 21, 21. And it was really, really hard to get alcohol at all, especially at the age of 13 or 14. But you know what was really, really easy to get our hands on? Adderall, Oxycontin, all sorts of other pharmaceuticals, and weed.
Valium, probably.
Yeah, definitely. And weed. So it was much, much, much easier to get drugs. The punishment as well, I'm backing up your point here, the punishment was much, much heavier than it is in the UK as well. I had a couple of friends who got probation just because a roach was found in their car. It's like, whoa.
Sorry, finish. It's. I was going to type an answer to Steen as well, but seeing as we brought it up, another thing to remember is that drug dealers will use children under 12 to carry their drugs, or to stand on a corner, or bike ride them to a house. Because under 12, you're not going to get punished for it. You're going to get told off, and they'll pay them a wage, and they'll be introduced to drugs in this way.
So, I mean,
that's true. That happened a lot in the town I'm from, Margate, prior to the gentrification over lockdown. But yeah, they had a task force specifically because there was a number of like 11, 10-year-olds that were being used as drug dealers, because the police wouldn't stop a kid in the street, but it was like talking to people and stuff. So yeah.
And if you're that young and somebody says, I'll give you 50 quid just for carrying this bag around for the day, you're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to touch on the America thing as well, because I think their traffic fatalities based on drunk driving are much higher than the UK's, because they start driving at a younger age and start drinking at a later age, so they feel more confident.
They do. Plus, there's another factor to it as well.
Yeah.
In the UK, there's a lot of public transport that's really easy to get, and you can walk to your local pub if you really want to. Out there, you have to drive to it, and it's like a 20-minute drive to get to your pub. And actually, I mean, this is crazy thinking about it, but I went out there to visit some friends when we were about 15, 16 or something like that. No, I turned 18. I remember turning 18 and got there and went, oh crap, I can't drink here anymore. But we went to a bar, I guess, and they actually said, "Oh no!" So the guys behind the bar know that we're all sort of underage. So they leave the back door open so we can nip out and get in our cars if the police come. And people are drinking pitchers and pitchers of beer, and you're just like, yeah.
I think bars and pubs in the UK have started taking licensing a lot more serious recently.
Yeah.
In terms of like them not allowing underage. It still happens a reasonable amount. Don't get me wrong, but it happens way less than like even when I was younger.
I get ID'd way more now with all the greys coming into my beard and everything like that than I did when I was younger.
I got ID'd in Sainsbury's for a Monster Energy drink.
Yeah, I've been ID'd for energy drinks and like.
And I was like, the age is 16, and they were like, yeah, but it's going to be 18 soon. And I was like, it's 16 now, and I'm buying it now. Why are you IDing me? She was really shirty with me, and I was just like, look, I'm clearly older than 16. Like, I'm chubby. I have a big beard. I got bags under my eyes.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, the way that sort of thing's going? I understand the need for the licensing and everything like that, but yeah, certain things I don't really see the whole caffeinated drinks thing. Like, really, I think that's a bit of a silly one.
That right, and that's such like if you had 10 beers, that's less dangerous than having 10 monsters in a row.
You reckon?
Oh, 100%.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, you'll go to hospital, no doubt. You'll go to hospital for that.
Should we try this on a stream?
No, people have done it. They've gone to hospital. We don't need to try it.
Kidney failure and
heart. Yeah, your heart can be overburdened, and you can start to have heart defects.
Just eat a packet of Pro Plus in one go. You'll get roughly the same kind of effect.
Oh, I've done that before.
You're probably like
Probably
me
not a
though.
whole
You're
pack.
probably immune to caffeine now. Like I can have high dosages of caffeine and not be affected. But yeah,
Actually, these days I don't have much caffeine at all. He says,
oh
having
well.
6 to 8 coffees every morning. Yeah. So there's a comment from Randolph saying, where is it? Sorry, I've lost it. Sorry. On capital, there it is. Sorry. On capital punishment, I sent you a link to my solution to an alternative way to use it that's ethical. So an ethical version of capital punishment. It might be
Unless
worth.
it says ban it, he's not describing an ethical use of capital punishment.
I suppose it depends on what moral theory you ascribe to.
Speaking of, because obviously I've done a lot of talking about psychological theories and how that relates to the prison system and punishment and stuff. I would really like to understand how what I've said might relate to moral philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, we can let Dave take over for a little bit. Randolph, I'll have a review of what you said, because obviously the time's getting on a bit tonight, so we want to get through what we've planned to say today. But I'll have a read of it and maybe bring it up in a future stream, if that's okay with you. Yeah, Dave, would you like to take it away on the ethical side of things?
Well, that's kind of a difficult question, because I sort of lean toward the idea, like what Philip discussed on our free will stream. So people, the desires drive them. And this kind of works into rehabilitation as well. We're determined, our actions are kind of determined. So there's a lot of cases where we can't really be held responsible for what we do because, we're basically compelled to do it by our psychology. So what we really need to do is reform.
Reform. That's it. That's it.
Reform. Going back to what you said.
Sorry, Dave.
Changing the desires, changing the... Sorry?
You cut out.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of what Luke was saying. We need to change the drives and desires in order to change the behavior. And I think one of the problems that comes with our criminal justice system is that there's a lot of moralizing that goes on within it. And moralizing should be removed from criminal justice, because the moralizing leads to this idea of put them on bread and water, stick them on, let them sleep on the floor. It's this idea that the person is evil or they're a bad person. It's not that there are conditions that create this environment. So moralizing and ethics kind of needs to be removed apart from how we treat the prisoners. Which is another reason why capital punishment is bad, because it's not about rehabilitation, it's not about justice, it's about punishing the evildoer.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that actually ties really well in with the research behind what actually works in reducing like criminal behavior doesn't work. So what's the point in punishing people? If it's a setup that they're essentially the cards that they were dealt when they were being brought up or whatever that leads to, is a predictor, a really strong predictor for future criminal behavior. Why isn't that how we address criminal behavior?
Exactly. And I think that brings up another point, is that one of the reasons a lot of people kind of get behind the punishment aspect is because of the moralizing, is because they feel, well, this person did something bad, they deserve to be punished for what they did.
So coming back to the free will point, Randolph makes a comment saying that one of the important considerations for justice systems in judging criminal acts is to consider whether the assailant could have chosen otherwise. And this is one of the problems with both legality and morality, especially if you go from a hard deterministic sort of standpoint. It doesn't necessarily. I mean, if hard determinism is true, you could still rehabilitate someone by sort of changing their processes and their desires and things like that. But assuming we're not talking about hard determinism, we're speaking of more of a compatibilist view on determinism. Would you like to explain why it's not so much of an issue in that regard?
Okay. This sort of goes back to what Luke was saying about impulse control. Oftentimes we have this thought or idea that comes into our head, and we seem to have the power to veto our desire to actually do this thing. But it's kind of a skill that may need to be learned for some people. So in certain circumstances, people could have chosen to do something other than the desire that pops into their head. Some people can't, so they need to be rehabilitated in their thought processes. Sorry?
Or that skill.
Yeah, exactly. So it is the case that people could have done otherwise. It's just that sort of conditioning isn't in their head already.
So essentially they might have had an A-B option, but because of their psychology, they can only see A. And so they could only do A because they haven't got that conditioning that allows them to do B. So from a legal standpoint, you could say, well, no, they could have done A or B. And you're right. Yeah, from a legal standpoint, they had A or B in front of them. But from a psychological standpoint, the only option they had really was A.
It's sort of like saying, can you choose your beliefs? I mean, to some extent, you kind of can. You can choose to reform what you believe. You can act on other information, but you can't really choose the result of what comes out of that information.
No, you can't exactly choose to be convinced by a particular piece of evidence.
Saying all this, I'm just going to throw a curveball, just a minor curveball, so a big part of like rehabilitative work is people taking responsibility for the actions that they have.
Yeah.
So whilst we maybe have in the background this acknowledgement that the main kind of milestones in their life probably led them to making that decision, and really they didn't really have any other option to make. In the foreground, there needs to be an element of work done with them to be able to say, look, you have the ability to choose otherwise, in order to stop them from thinking that they're out of control of their lives and just going, well, this is just who I am and that's just what I do. Well, because otherwise that will...
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why a lot of philosophers say something like, we might not have free will, but we should act as if we do.
Yeah. If the criminal justice system is employing that as a rationale for doing rehabilitative work instead of punishment, then they need to make sure that it's really like a low-level philosophy within it, rather than like an explicit public philosophy, because otherwise criminals are going to be like, well,
I had no choice.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, you're still it's still you, though. It's still the self. You're still actively making the choice. You've still reflected on whatever and made that choice. It just means that you can be locked into a choice that you were always going to make and not actually had the ability to do it. So you're still accountable. You're still responsible for your action. It's just that actually, had you been given better tools, you could have done a different action.
And you still kind of need to be, depending on what you've done, obviously, you may still need to be removed from society to protect others until your thinking has been rehabilitated. Yeah, or I don't like the term rehabilitated. I prefer kind of reformed.
Reformed, I think that's a good one. Yeah.
That's a good one. So obviously we've touched on capital punishment as well, and you mentioned that you'll find the capital punishment, and I assume corporal punishment as well, both to be immoral. And pointless.
The additional thing with capital punishment is it's actually detrimental to society in the sense that not just from a moral perspective, but from like a cost perspective. So a lot of people have this this myth that capital punishment is a cheap way. They'd rather someone just get killed and be done with it than hold them in prison at the cost of the state for a number of years. But the way that capital punishment works, at least in the States, where it is very much a process that is ongoing. The amount of pills that you have, the amount of time you spend in prison during that time where you're on death row and stuff, it actually adds up, and also the cost of the the actual killing adds up to way more than they would even if they spent a lifetime in prison. So in terms of cost as well, there's no excuse for it.
Yeah, and sort of going to the corporal punishment idea. If you think about in schools, kids are not anymore, but kids were given corporal punishment, and that was a sort of moralizing. You've been bad because you've not gone along with the system. You've not. But when we remove corporal punishment and stop seeing it as a problem with their morality, school systems got better. Kids learned better. Kids were more likely to want to go to school.
Yeah, that's true.
And with the capital punishment thing, what Luke was saying, it's it costs more to do this death penalty thing, which is why a lot of it is to do with satisfying people's bloodlust. Kind of, people get this moral idea that this person is evil and they deserve to be punished. I want to see him dead. I want revenge. And that's what the death penalty represents.
So what you're saying is we should actually put them all against the wall and throw atheists at them.
Yeah, like in Islam.
That's what I was going to say. Actually, is even it only costs more in countries where the criminal justice system is actually set up in a way where that individual is has what is it called? Due something. What's the name of it? Due course?
Sorry?
They have due course.
Oh, due course,
yeah.
Due course, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously in countries where they don't have due course, then it is cheaper to kill that person because it is a simple case of charging them with the offence and then carrying out the sentence.
Yeah. And as Philip says, even if it was way cheaper than the alternative, it's still an unacceptable method, and I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
All I was saying, Philip, was that there's just no grounds on which to defend it. It's even if you're saying that, well, it's cheaper. There's just no grounds to defend it at all.
Well, have you watched the film came out recently with Elijah Wood, and he's like the profiler discussing with Ted Bundy about his case?
No.
Okay, well, in it they use real video footage of the outside of the prison as Ted Bundy is going to go get executed. And it's surrounded by people with placards going, he gets what he deserves, screaming out for his death, screaming out for his blood. I don't really see a difference between those people and somebody like Ted Bundy. It's just that one seems to be more acceptable because they're on the other side of the fence.
Yeah. And thinking about him as an infamous serial killer, how much do you think his execution played a role in that compared to someone like Peter Sutcliffe, like who we were talking about earlier, who went to prison, people kind of forgot about him, he didn't have this big spectacle of a death, kind of entrenched his infamy, and then ended up... he's obviously still infamous to a certain extent, but nowhere near as much as Ted Bundy is. And
there's at least 3 films a year about Ted Bundy. Nobody really hears about the Yorkshire Ripper.
Yeah. There's one film, I think, on Netflix about the Yorkshire Ripper just because he died, and they were like, well, he's big in the news again. And it's like... And
it was pretty interesting because it was also focused on... Oh, it's good. It focuses on...
I don't know.
We don't know. We'll never find out when it's done. Oh, you're back, Dave. You're back.
Frozen again. Yep. It's interesting because it's not focusing on Peter Sutcliffe as such, but the failure of the cops to actually do their job.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that's better. That's better. I prefer that kind of show.
I do, because it doesn't glamorize the serial killer then.
Yeah.
It shows the problems with the legal system in catching the serial killers.
Yeah, there's a book actually that's really interesting called The Five by Haley Rubenhold, who's a historian. It's about the Jack the Ripper victims, and it like fleshes out their life, and you barely even hear the Jack the Ripper's name in it. It's just talking about their life as individuals and what troubles they might have had in London, in Whitechapel at that time, and it's so interesting, and it really takes away this whole like Jack the Ripper killed prostitutes. Like none of them were prostitutes. That's a myth, complete myth, and it's just shocking that, like, you know, yeah, it's a great book though. I'd recommend it 100%.
And I think that's one of the problems with doing something like that with, say, Jack the Ripper, is that they start to present the victims as somebody who kind of deserved
it. Yeah.
Yeah, which, I mean, there's enough victim blaming that goes on in the world anyway, isn't there?
It's a whole different subject.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We could talk
the
about
interesting ones.
Yeah.
I could talk about it for so long.
Oh, should we book you in for next week then?
We can have a conversation about victim blaming.
Book him in on Thursday, and he can just do the whole stream himself.
I don't have the computer power for that.
I mean, to be honest, I could probably set it up for you, and you could just chat away whilst I'm on the other line.
That's hilarious.
Just use any desk or team viewer, and away you go.
I don't even need people to bounce off of. I can just chat.
Yeah. Kimmo says, in most Scandinavian or Nordic nations, corporal punishment has been illegal for a couple of generations. And I'm not surprised by that. They seem to be incredibly progressive with all of their forms of punishment and rehabilitation and so on.
Just a bit racist. That's the only issue now.
Yeah. But the Scandinavians are willing to pay taxes to fund their society to be
yes, exactly. Yeah,
which we're not as a neoliberal country. We're more about, I don't want to pay anything, but the government should also be everything.
I wouldn't mind paying taxes if I didn't have to pay for GP appointments and prescriptions and like physiotherapy appointments and psychology appointments and road tax and stuff like I wouldn't mind paying more tax if I didn't have to pay it elsewhere, but because I have to pay elsewhere, it makes the tax seem pointless.
Move to Wales.
Education. Education. Oh my god.
Well, in Wales, we get funded to doing a higher education.
Yeah, shut up.
We don't pay GP. You wouldn't be able to do the education thing until you've been living here for 3 years, but you would get free prescriptions, free GP appointments, all that kind of stuff.
And lots of sheep.
Which is fill your heart's desire.
We've got loads of Tesco's as well and some McDonald's. Funnily enough, though, the town of Carnarvon didn't actually have a McDonald's until like the 2000 or something.
Oh, wow.
How did you cope?
Much better.
Yeah, I suppose you can't have gluten at all, can you? So you can't really have.
I could then.
Oh, could you?
Well, they think it was affecting me back then, and that's why I couldn't put on weight and stuff. But yeah, I can't have gluten now.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same for my nana. I mean, they thought it probably affected her entire life, but it wasn't until my granddad died that it became a serious problem for her. But in Tenerife, and I assume other parts of Spain, they've got gluten-free McDonald's, and they even sell gluten-free beer in the McDonald's.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
We've got quite a few gluten-free places around Llandudno, to be honest, like a chip shop and a couple of bakeries and like a tea room.
Here's a moral conundrum for you guys.
Okay.
If somebody is vegan for moral reasons, they ought not eat vegan food from places like McDonald's, right?
I would say no, because then they're still supporting the meat industry.
see, this is the problem I'm having right now, because the thing is, best vegan options are the ones made by meat producers, like Richmond.
That's because they want to. Well, they just want to draw on as much traffic as possible.
Yeah. Richmond sausages, the KFC vegan burger, Greg's vegan options. They're all really good, and all of the ones that are just purely like vegan organizations, they just make much worse products.
Make your own food.
But then again, it's like me valuing taste over morals, right?
Yeah,
it's the same issue as eating meat for the taste. I'm still funding meat distributors.
Yeah,
but you could reduce.
Oh, it's gone.
Do you buy? Oh, you could reduce that down to: do you buy food from Tesco's? Do you buy food from your local co-op?
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you're like, well, where do you do it? Unless you're actually growing your own food. I just want
as many good place points as possible, guys.
Yeah. Good points. Well, so you're going to have to grow your own food. But the danger doing that is you're taking the money out of someone else's hands. So that might get you some bad place points too.
No.
Well, if you do that, you might be buying from a corporation that copyrights seeds and steals.
That happens.
In America, yeah. I don't know if it happens anywhere else, but it definitely happens in America. And you know how sort of like the pollen from plants can blow and pollinate other plants. There are companies that then sue other people because, you've got some of ours and you haven't paid for the rights to have these seeds. And
that's shocking. Yeah. That's really weird.
That is America
that's
for you.
Capitalist Earth.
So Alistair says, what would the issue be with it exactly? He's a vegan himself. So it shifts demand to plant-based stuff. You're right. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it is a step in the right direction.
My worry is that I'm funding an organization that exclusively, all of its other products are meat-based and therefore like directly meat-based, like Richmond sausages. Like, they directly kill animals. And I get that argument because that's the kind of way I rationalize it as well. It just seems like it's kind of like I should be supporting vegan-based companies that only exclusively have vegan products.
Yeah, I mean, change the dynamic, okay? And you say you were talking about, let's say there's the best school in the area. They have a really good education system. They're a private school, but funding them, they use that money to I don't know, fund really immoral things like throwing people into slavery or something like that. So really good education system, and actually you want to have the really good education, but they do something really bad that you view as morally bad with that money. And that's the thing. So the vegan products can help fund a meat industry. So the meat industry is something that you view as morally bad. So this is why there's the problem, but it's also better at the same time. And hopefully it will shift some of the other vegan produce to being better quality as well. I mean, there are some great vegan products. So some of the burgers that have come out are really, really nice. But actually you can make yourself a decent like chickpea and sweet potato curry and you know, that's really, really, really nice.
Yeah, no, I can make some good vegan food, but like sometimes I just want a burger.
Yeah, or you just want a sausage roll, or you want a quick and easy food. And there isn't a decent option.
Yeah, precisely. But KFC have a good option. Greg's have good options. McDonald's now has one that I haven't tried yet, but that's apparently good. No, but then there's not.
Yeah.
Well, there's not enough just vegan places, and all those places are really expensive. Like shockingly so. Like,
you've watched A Good Place, haven't you? Obviously,
yes, I have, yeah.
It's one of the really good points that they make is that it's almost impossible to be perfectly good in the kind of society that we live in. Whatever you do, you're going to be funding something bad somewhere down the line.
Sorry?
Help people
Yeah,
learn
but-
disabilities. I drive a
Yeah,
motorless
but-
car. I don't fly anywhere.
But you
Yeah,
drink almond milk.
Yeah, that's it. Somewhere down the line, these things happen. The best you can do is try and minimize what you do and actively change the things you don't like.
Yeah.
Unless you want to go live in the woods and not wear clothes and, things like that.
Yeah.
So
Me,
the best you can do is harm reduction rather than try and live a life where you cause absolutely no harm because of the way the world is set up.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. So you can shift things in the right direction. You can have an acknowledgement to the fact that you are putting money into, say, McDonald's.
Also, part of me
but
thinks that
it's still better. You're increasing you're increasing the demand for the vegan product, and
like Alistair says,
yeah. Well, and it's the same like with the whole gluten-free thing, and all the vegetarian options and things like that. All of this stuff wasn't in restaurants originally.
Well, I remember that. Do you know Meat Liquor?
No.
The Meat Liquor is a restaurant in London. It's got various branches, but I think the biggest one is in London. It used to just sell meat and liquor. That was the like kind of like the unique selling point.
so a typical American meal.
Yeah, exactly. And it would sell like ribs, and it would sell like burgers and stuff like that. And on the menu when I went there, my partner at the time was vegetarian, and the vegetarian options were called rabbit food, and it was like 2 salads. But now they've really bought into like the fake meat stuff, so they have Beyond Burgers and stuff like that in there on their menu, and they don't call it rabbit food anymore because they realise that's dismissive to vegetarians that want to go eat there. So, like for a restaurant that's exclusively its USP was meat and liquor, even they've had to shift because in London they're aware that people just aren't going to buy into it as much, which I think is great. It really does show a shift in that approach, which is awesome.
It's good. Now, here's a question for you vegans. Alistair, if you're still there. I know you're not a vegan, though, are you? You're pescatarian. Yeah. But lab-grown meat, right?
I'd eat it.
Yeah, you'd eat it because there's no moral component. You're a pescatarian for moral reasons.
Yeah.
So, Alistair, are you a vegan for moral reasons? And if so, would you have lab-grown meat? I suppose we've got to wait for the responses. It takes about 20 seconds.
I would imagine Alistair is vegan for utilitarian reasons.
Yeah.
Well, that's just my guess anyway.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying that Hujama Flip, what's his name? That guy, Cosmic Skeptic.
Yeah.
He has a very good argument for why to be vegan and not to be like pescatarian or something. And I think I'm leaning towards that now. It's just a more of a but like a lifestyle thing I need to shift. Currently busy, so trying to implement like new meals and stuff and learn new ways of cooking and stuff is difficult.
Yeah, I also find in this country especially, cost is a big thing. I find like when I did Veganuary, the cost of my meals was so much more. And obviously I did Veganuary in lockdown, and I found my shopping just from lockdown went up. I used to spend sort of 60, 70 quid a week, and my shopping went up to sometimes 150, 200 quid a week, just for the fact that...
I think mine would just be like that now anyway, though, because a lot of the stuff I'm buying is for vegan stuff. It's just butter and sometimes milk, cheese that we get that isn't, and sometimes fish, which is very rarely at the moment. Don't barely even eat. I usually eat fish in restaurants because their vegetarian options are usually shocking or have mushrooms. That's another big reason why I'm pescatarian, because when I go out to restaurants, their vegetarian options are always mushroom based, and I cannot do that.
Yeah,
can't bring myself to do it.
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, when we actually did the vegan thing, obviously me and the wife have various dietary problems, and one of mine is I can't really have too much starchy carbs, and obviously that's a big filler in a vegan diet, and she can't handle not only the gluten side of things, but too many legumes, which again is another big part of the filler that comes in it. So all the beanie things and all of that. So we found for us that it was very, very, very difficult. I still made it to the end of January. She couldn't because she just kept on bloating out and being quite unwell. And she was just like, no, I can't do this, which is fair enough. But it's one of those things. I do see a half decent moral argument for it. And I try and reduce the amount of meat and stuff that I eat. But because of the other things that go along with it, it's hard for both of us to actually eat that way. So in that regard, should we put ourselves in agony every day or give up and die, or just go, actually, we'll do what we can, but we're going to eat a bit of meat?
Well, I think if someone is eating meat once a week, I'm like, I don't have an issue with that.
It's more.
I think it's when people are like, I cannot imagine a meal without meat. Like, bullshit. You know, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people would have had meat way less because it was more expensive. Maybe more than 40 years ago. I don't know. At some point before I lived, meat would have been less frequently in a meal because of the cost of it. So bullshit that people can't think about a meal that doesn't have meat in it. That's ridiculous.
Well, you consider the average pasta meal as well.
Yes, tomatoes, olive oil, garlic, herbs.
Okay,
pasta.
There's often cheese in it, to be fair, but
cheese,
so but it doesn't have meat in it anyway. A lot of breakfast meals wouldn't necessarily have, apart from your fry up at the weekend. You generally don't have meat on that. Yeah, you might have eggs and there might be butter, but
vegan fry ups are banging though.
Yeah, I've had a vegetarian one. I assume it's the same, but minus the halloumi.
Oh no, let me just say vegetarian fry ups because I have the egg.
Yeah,
it's like fried tomatoes, fried bread, fried vegan sausages, fried egg.
So you're saying I shouldn't be putting the flesh of my victims in my chili?
What if it's all like Soylent Green though? What if these Beyond Burgers and these like Richmond sausages are actually just meat? They're just telling us it's not so that we buy it. Soylent Green, it's people.
That's why there's a push for capital punishment.
Yes, yeah, they need more products.
Good quote from Kimmo. Food is the first thing, morals follow on. That's Burlo Brecht. Alistair came back. So he agrees that there's nothing wrong with lab-grown meat, and he definitely would. So let's think about the lab-grown meat quickly, though. If you could then choose what meat it was, because obviously you could replicate any meat. Would you try, say, human meat? Would it be a particular human? Would it be a particular species? A very rare species of animal, or would you just want bog standard mince?
I think I just want bog standard mince because I miss my chilies and my lasagna and my. Well, actually, I used to really love steak and kidney pie as well, so maybe steak and kidney. That's my favourite meal.
I think we should just be eating the rich.
That is technically an option, Dave. Might go to jail, but it is an option.
Rocks are vegan. Be like rocks.
So someone.
I mean, obviously that's a joke, but
true.
it ties into all the stuff. Yeah, well, they don't eat meat. Yeah, well, they don't believe in gods. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Although they don't have hair.
Bald atheist vegans. The worst things.
Oh, and as an atheist, is lab-grown babies on Sunday okay? Brilliant. We've really gone off
completely segue.
Yeah. We've probably spent about half an hour chatting various dietary things. Although I think we basically covered off what we intended, didn't we?
Yes, I don't think I had any more points.
I like your point there, though, Dave. It's basically our communion wafer. Awesome. I just didn't mean to do that. So, is there anything you guys want to discuss before we go, or are there any questions from the audience or any comments? If I've missed something that you've said, I do apologise. Sometimes the chat gets moves away from me, and I can't keep up with it. So I do apologise if I've missed any of your comments or anything like that. I'm sure you were all outstandingly funny and incredibly intelligent with everything you said.
Yeah, I didn't really read the chat today.
I can't
Sorry.
believe it. Did you see Randolph's capital punishment thing?
So he said he sent a link to the to me, but I said to him that I'd cover it off at. I'll have a read of it and cover it off.
Okay, nice one. I wouldn't mind having a read of it myself if you don't mind sending me the link.
Yeah, no, we'll do that, and we can have a review of it if you want, or tie it into like the victim blaming thing when we cover that, and it can be a little bonus section at the end. Philip says he saw it and it's interesting. So, yeah, interesting. Philip, is there a brief skinny you can give us on it before we go?
Yeah. I have a question.
He says it's not sure if it'd be called a capital punishment. So here's an alternative to capital punishment. It's not. Good. If that's the answer, then good.
If somebody who's going to receive the death penalty is a victim of their own psychology and upbringing, is killing them victim blaming?
That's a good question. I'm going to go with yes.
I would. Which is one of the reasons why the death penalty is kind of bad.
It's another reason, yeah.
One of the many reasons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes back to the whole punishment thing. Any form of punishment in that regard. As you mentioned, it doesn't work, but it is essentially, if most crimes are committed by people through products of their environment and their psychology, then they're all victims to themselves, in a way.
Would you guys think that it's ever going to be possible to change like public perception of criminality and how like people who commit offences are perceived by society? Or do you think that it's always going to be used by politicians as a leverage for votes?
This kind of goes back to moralizing. You could probably change it by changing the way people see morality and ethics, and that would stop the politicians from being able to tap into that.
Right.
So
I think it would take a lot of work, but
yeah, I think it'd have to be the thing is, politicians would have to put that in the curriculum, right?
And the media would have to have a different representation as well, because people are heavily influenced by the media. So you need to change the media, the politicians, and the education system.
Well, that's one of the things that the media does is tap into that moral, kind of general moral perception of the population as such.
It does by reducing that person's life to that offence. This person is, and using descriptive language that paints that picture person in an othering way, like this monster or this ferocious individual or vile murderer, etc. Whatever it is, they use this language that's very emotive, and isolate their life to that period of time and don't really talk about their past. Or if they do talk about their past, they talk about it as if, how sick it was. This person, thinking about school shooters, for instance, they talk about how sick they were, how they took sick photos of them with guns and they did this and that, and they don't really look at maybe that person was abused or bullied or received hatred or anything like that would lead someone to that extreme behavior, because that's very extreme behavior. I think they I don't focus on that stuff. I think they should focus on the people committing their acts anyway, they should focus on victims.
They should focus on the victims, yeah. I mean, if you think about the way serial killers are portrayed, they talk about how they used to do these evil things to innocent animals when they were younger, but rarely talk about the kind of family life that they might have had.
Yeah.
Yeah, or any trauma that could have caused them to change. Yeah, awesome. Before we go, I do want to say to any of the theists that are watching this video right now, I recently posted a video on our channel called 10 Questions for Theists, and it's simply 10 questions that I'd like you to answer, especially if you can do a video response. That would be absolutely fantastic. But if you just want to do a written response in the comments under it as well, that would be great. The video's like about 3.5 minutes long. I have put the questions as chapters underneath, but I do go into it in a little bit more detail in the actual questions. We're hoping to build a bit more conversation about people's beliefs and that sort of thing, and maybe in the future bring a few people on to explain some alternative positions that they have. We've already had one really, really good video response from a secular theist who had some answers that I didn't think we were going to get at all. So there's already made me think and question some things that I already think of. And that's the idea. I'd like not only you to question what you think and believe, but actually make me question what I think and believe. So if you have time, it's about 3.5 minutes long. And if you could answer it for us, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Ooh. Right, is there any more comments? No, I don't see anything there. It's Philip's basically talking about the paper.
Spoiling it.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm sure the chat has gone by and people might have said it, but it's it does sound like something that'd be a bit interesting. And maybe when we come round to having our stream on victim blaming, Luke, we can have it in there as a bit of a bonus.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, awesome. Do either of you guys have anything you want to say before we go?
Nope.
Okay.
Except check out my video on Thursday.
Yes. So if you've forgotten, on Thursday, we're not going to be doing our live stream. We're going to be doing a stream with MathPig at 10 o'clock GMT, that is. So that's 5 p.m. Eastern. But around 9 o'clock, Dave is going to be releasing a video. And what's it on, Dave?
The ridiculousness of atheistic rock.
So that should be incredibly entertaining, if nothing else. Luke, thank you for coming on again. It's always a pleasure to have you here. It really is. It's great to have you back. So thank you.
We need someone smart on our channel.
That's why you invited me then.
And obviously, thank you to everybody who has been joining in the chat. It's absolutely fantastic. It's probably our favourite part of doing the streams. I do apologise that I can't always keep up with it. And obviously, everybody who is watching the rerun or catching the podcast or anything like that, thank you very much as well. So, you've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi show on Crime and Punishment. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Luke.
Have a good night, all.
Good night.
Bye.
The rocktastic atheists.
Aaron Rock.
That was a fun
Rockettes.
stream.